Hello, I'm Lexi, and this is what you should know. Before I say too much on anything else, I would like to put forward at the moment I'm in the process of moving home, so my closet is actually kind of empty right now. I'm doing my best to dampen, but there may be a slight echo. On top of that, I'm also going to be doing my best to make sure that I'm still on track with my releases. However, due to the sheer amount of work I have to get done to get myself moved, it's gonna be potentially a little spotty, but I will do my best, I promise. And with that being said, after the Rockhampton case, I really needed something just a little bit more whimsical, and started considering the options on what that could be and what it would look like. I have already covered the conspiracy theories for the disappearance of Harold Holt, and I have covered the more well-known cryptids. So I decided the next logical step was ghosts, or another well-known Australian issue, aliens. And when I say aliens, I don't mean those fleeing to somewhere safe. I'm talking X-Files, Area 51, Mars attacks. So turning our eyes towards the skies, and not in the way that those in the Brindabella Mountains do when they're trying to look inconspicuous while mushroom picking. This is what you should know about the pilot that vanished. Frederick Volantic always had a great passion for aviation since he was a child, and in 1977, at the tender age of 18, he decided he was going to become a pilot. Fred lived in Melbourne with his parents and his younger brother Richard, who was only 12 when he vanished. He had achieved a total of 150 total flying hours and held a Class 4 instrument rating, which meant he could fly at night, but only in visual meteorological conditions. He had applied to enlist in the Royal Australian Air Force twice, but was rejected each time due to inadequate educational qualifications. This could be as simple as he didn't have his minimum required schooling. Being the 70s, there was a high number of children leaving school without the ability to read or write. But this didn't deter him in the slightest, and he became a member of the Royal Australian Air Force Air Training Corps, determined to have a career in aviation. This led him to study part-time to become a commercial pilot. However, determination doesn't always equate to success, as he had poor achievement record, having failed twice all 5 commercial license examination subjects, and as recently as the month before his disappearance, had failed 3 more commercial license subjects. To put it quite bluntly, he wasn't good at this. He had also been involved in flying incidences such as straying into a controlled zone in Sydney, for which he received a warning, and twice deliberately flying into a cloud, where prosecution was being considered. So suffice to say that Frederick really was not a great pilot, and had a long way to go before he was able to apply for a position where they would genuinely consider him to take care of the lives of many mid-flight. Another thing to know about Fred was at the age of 20, in 1978, he had a young fiancée. Rhonda Rushton was his betrothed at the tender age of 16. Even when looking for something whimsical, I come across something somewhat pedophilic. As it was the 70s, I had to ask the older adults in my life if it was normal for a 20-year-old to date a 16-year-old, and whether or not it was frowned upon. And it turns out it was relatively normal at the time. My mother was 16 when she started dating my father, who was 20. That being said, from this modern perspective, not cool. But that is not the point of this episode, and many years later, Rhonda still speaks extremely fondly of him, so I really don't think there's anything to worry about there. Wildly enough, though, Frederick had asked her to join him on that fateful flight. Rhonda was aware of his plans, but had declined. She said despite his plans to set a course across Bass Strait, he had admitted he was fearful of flying over water, almost as if he had some kind of gut feeling about that flight. How creepy is that? The destination of Fred's final flight was King Island, but the motivation of that flight remains unknown. He had told flight officials that he was going to go to King Island to pick up some friends, while he had told others that he was going to go pick up crayfish. Maybe he was friends with crayfish, I don't know. However, after the fact, investigators found both stated reasons to be untrue. But what else made this spooky is that Frederick had also failed to inform King Island Airport of his intention to land there, going against standard operating procedures. So what really did happen that day? Let's not dilly-dally shilly-shally and get straight into it. What happened on that flight? That flight had been completely normal until about 7:06 p.m. when Fred radioed the Melbourne flight service to report an unidentified aircraft following him at roughly 4,500 feet. The service told him that there was no traffic registered to be near him at the time. Understandably, he knew what he was seeing and insisted there was a large unknown aircraft near him. He described it as having 4 bright lights and claimed it had passed 1,000 feet above him, moving at high speed. During the next 5 minutes, he reported the aircraft's movements, saying it felt like they must have been playing some kind of game as it was orbiting above him. The only other description besides the 4 landing lights was that the aircraft's outer body was a polished metal, and that it had a green light on it. A few minutes after first radioing the Melbourne flight service, Frederick reported that he was having engine trouble. While it isn't impossible for his aircraft to start having engine issues mid-flight, it is important to understand that this would have been an extremely short flight. The Cessna would have had its pre-flight checks, and it would have not been a lack of fuel issue, as it had been filled up before leaving. The radio officials didn't seem to pay too much attention to his declaration of engine issues and asked him once more to identify the other aircraft. This is where he uttered some of the most chilling words in this whole report. It isn't an aircraft. The transmission didn't end straight away and continued on with him remaining silent for up to 20 seconds. This means he would have been holding the button down for it to still transmit. And while he was still transmitting, the radio officials heard a metallic scraping sound. Initially it was believed that Frederick had crashed, but a sea and air search of the area he was last reported in turned up nothing. The Australian Department of Transport looked into Frederick's disappearance, but was unable to find anything. A few scattered reports of civilians seeing planes landing or flying overhead were collected, but in the end, the disappearance was presumed fatal, and the case was closed. But with the straight facts in mind, let's look into the theories of what actually happened to Frederick Valentek. It was 3 days after Frederick vanished that the Associated Press published the headline, UFO Enthusiast Missing After Reporting Craft. And this is where a lot of the alien theories came from. The fact that dear old Freddy was a UFO enthusiast, as was his father Guido. Fred wasn't just convinced of the existence of aliens, however. He was also convinced that they would attack Earth, and likely soon. This may sound crazy, however, ufologists have speculated that he may have gotten too close to the truth, and in retaliation, extraterrestrials either destroyed or abducted him and his plane. There were also some witnesses that reported seeing an erratically moving green light in the sky, and that Fred was in a steep dive at the time. The morning after Fred's disappearance, a farmer in Cape Otway observed a flying object hovering over his property. He claimed it was approximately 30 meters across, and it appeared to have a small aeroplane attached to its side and was leaking oil. He was so deeply unsettled by what he saw that he actually scratched the plane's tail number into the tractor that he was on, so he wouldn't forget it. Allegedly, and I say allegedly for good reason here, that number matched Fred's Cessna. Unfortunately, this lead could not be looked into further as there was no other information. And now there is the issue that the farmer may no longer be alive. But there is great debate on whether this could be trusted, as this alleged sighting didn't come out until 36 years after the fact. Sounds dodgy, if you ask me. Fred's father Guido was also a UFO enthusiast, and believed his son was being held by people from another planet. He also used the words, someone from another world, and then added they may want to hold him for a week or so before returning him. Suffice to say, with Fred never being seen since, if he was taken, they had no intentions on bringing him back. Just gives me wildly creeped out vibes of the Bermuda Triangle ride in Queensland. Just these mannequins in pods frozen in time from different eras. Makes you wonder if he is still frozen like that, unaware of the decades that have since passed. The next theory is effectively Occam's Razor. The easiest solution is most likely correct. In this instance, we would be talking about the tragedy that Frederick likely crashed and died. He was an eager young pilot with grand goals for his future career. However, it didn't seem like the career was ever meant to be for him. As stated at the start, he was rejected by the Australian Air Force twice. He had also recently failed his second attempt at a commercial flight exam. To add to it all, he had been involved in 3 flight incidents. So really, it doesn't sound like he was that great of a pilot. Am I saying I could do it? No, I've never tried and I don't have any intention on doing so. They say that flying over water into the setting sun can be quite disorientating. Even the best of pilots, never mind someone with the same history as Fred, and due to his obsession with aliens, he was distracted from focusing on critical flight tasks. The 4 lights he saw could have multiple explanations, such as there being another aircraft that wasn't registered, or planetary and star lights. There is also what is known as the Min-Min lights, a light phenomena. This could be from insects swarming that have taken on bioluminescent characteristics, or of an owl species with their own natural occurring source of bioluminescence. In a bank, it's possible he fell victim to the tilted horizon illusion and became disorientated and potentially entered a graveyard spiral or even became inverted. The green light he saw was very likely his own being reflected off the water. Due to the gravity-fed fuel system of his plane, his engine would have quickly been deprived of fuel, which would have explained why his transmission at the end sounded rough and why there was a horrible grinding sound in the transmission. But where would the aircraft have gone? The issue with that is the Bass Strait is in extremely dangerous waters, and it shouldn't come as a shock, but the Bass Strait Triangle also includes Cheviot Beach, the very same beach that Harold Holt vanished from. This means the same dangerous currents that swept the Prime Minister away also likely swept away the remains of that Cessna. But that really does take us to the next theory, Australia's own Bermuda Triangle. Dating back as far as 1797, the Bass Strait Triangle has been the site of many mysterious disappearances and accidents. The British warship HMS Sappho disappeared, with well over 100 lives lost and no positively identifiable wreckage. In 1901, the SS Federal disappeared without a trace, carrying coal and a crew of 31, the wreckage of which was only recently located in the year 2019. Over 100 years later. Honestly, the sheer amount of vanishings in this area that have been recorded is so intense that it literally needs to be its own episode. But this place is a wealth of disappearances and alien sightings, so perhaps a strange portal opened up and pulled Frederick into a parallel universe. People are going to discuss aliens, I may as well put portals. Fight me. But let's look at this from another perspective, one that feels a little more reasonable than the paranormal. The night Fred disappeared, police received several reports of an unidentified aircraft landing on Cape Otway, the same area the alleged farmer saw the aircraft. If we assume that Fred followed the flight plan he filed, he would have been in the Cape's general vicinity at the time he began communicating with the air flight service. For the reasons he would have fled, it is possible that he became so frustrated by his shortcomings and fabricated the UFO sighting in order to stage his own disappearance. This would not only serve to validate his UFO conspiracies, but it would give him a fresh start elsewhere. But what about his child fiancée, I hear you ask? I told you, I'm a paranormal being that can hear you through the podcast. He did invite her to come with him. He likely would have done so in hopes that she would have joined him and then taken her to start a new life. But when she declined, he realized he was running out of time, and I honestly imagine running away to start a new life would require a time frame. But where would he have gone? Honestly, much like everyone else on this planet, I am completely unsure. There has been no sightings of him since that day. Heck, maybe he flew to Beijing and lived out his days as a Chinese hero, and maybe he was the spy that Harold Holt was supposed to be. Yeah, I'm not gonna let that joke go. Doubles up for fun, as it's in the same triangle that both Harold and Frederick vanished from. But this is all I honestly have for you this week. If you have any theories on what happened to Frederick, please don't be shy. Drop a line, tell me what you think. As always, I'll be posting pictures relevant to the case on Facebook and Instagram, What You Should Know Australia. Keep up to date with my latest updates on Twitter, @WhiskerPod. If you have any case suggestions or requests, please don't be a stranger. Reach out to me by email. whatyoushouldknowaustralia@gmail.com. But until next week, stay safe and stay hydrated. Bye!